Without great characters, TV programs simply wouldn't be worth watching, which is why it's so frustrating for us when the writers and producers of our favourite shows neglect some of their best fictional creations and, on occasion, even kill the character off for no obvious reason whatsoever. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 TV characters who deserved better. Number 9. Tracy The Mother, How I Met Your Mother. Yep, we're still talking about the finale of How I Met Your Mother. After spending a decade building up to her reveal, and with her introduction generally being a big deal considering that the entire premise of the show was built entirely around her, the titular mother, aka Tracy, was finally introduced as a proper character in season 9 of How I Met Your Mother. Kristen Milioti is charming and likeable in everything she's in, and she brought a whole new dimension to the show in its final run. For a while, Himium did the unthinkable and paid off its titular premise by finally pairing Ted with Tracy and having them be as cute and as funny as you always imagined that they would be together. But then, just as the two got going, Tracy was unexpectedly killed off in the final episodes after viewers had just fallen in love with her. This came with a last-minute pivot back to focus on Ted and Robin's relationship, which left the mother feeling like a total footnote on her own show. Number 8. Grant Supergirl. Supergirl may centre around the Girl of Steel, but there was another character that stole the attention during the first season of the show, and that was none other than Kara's sassy boss, Cat Grant. Much like Harrison Wells on The Flash and John Diggle on Arrow, Cat was the moral compass of Supergirl, and she was always on hand to provide some advice when Kara found herself in a pickle. However, she was so much more than a sounding board, as the writers gave Cat needs and goals of her own. When Supergirl moved production to Vancouver during its second season, though, Cat's actress was actually unable to appear in a regular capacity, though producers did promise that she would recur in some form. Unfortunately, though, her appearances since have been few and far between, and apart from the odd reference here and there, it's almost as if Cat never existed. This is bad enough in itself, but what makes it much worse is the fact that Cat would have never abandoned her position at CatCo, something she specified regularly, so her continued absence doesn't really make any sense. At least a version of her recently turned up again in a time travel episode though, so that's something, I guess? Number 7. Lana Lang, Smallville. While everyone knows that Clark Kent's primary love interest is Lois Lane, Smallville did things quite differently, as this iteration of the young farm boy spent 8 out of the show's 10 seasons pining after his childhood sweetheart, Lana Lang. This wasn't a bad thing though, as the character was incredibly well written, and in the first few seasons it was easy to see why Clark was so in love with her. She was certainly characterized as the girl next door, but make no mistake, there was a lot of depth to the writing. Well, that was until the character started behaving erratically in the later seasons of the show and made decisions that went against her very nature. Her relationship with Lex, for one, was completely unbelievable and ultimately didn't work. The writers did manage to salvage some of the original essence of this character during her brief return in season 8, and the tragic conclusion of her relationship with Clark was somewhat poetic, but it doesn't change the fact that had season 6 and 7 not existed, this character's arc would have been so much stronger. Number 6. Cordelia Chase, Angel. After moving from Buffy to sister show Angel, Cordelia Chase became a breakout star. While she previously played the role of a ditzier cheerleader, her role on the spin-off showed the character maturing into a bona fide demon hunter, and her relationship with Angel in particular acted as a huge draw. Then season 4 came around and everything went to the dogs. Her storyline this year amounted to little more than pure character assassination, as the once loyal, good and smart hero hooked up with Angel's son, who became possessed, fell into a coma, and then died unceremoniously off-screen. Focus on this arc was reignited when star Charisma Carpenter publicly spoke out about her mistreatment on the show, detailing years of allegations of misconduct against showrunner Joss Whedon, who she argues sabotaged the character in part because the actress became pregnant. This then made it clear both the character and the actress deserved better. Number 5. Shireen Baratheon, Game of Thrones. Anyone who knows anything about Game of Thrones will tell you about the show's penchant for killing off its own central characters. However, the series didn't always succeed in this department, especially in its final season, and while you could have a bunch of the main characters in this spot from that year, it's actually Shireen Baratheon I'm highlighting today. Now, while you could make an argument that Shireen's narrative was due to conclude considering that Stannis was set to be killed, something about the young girl's death just didn't sit right with viewers. Shireen was a rare source of positivity in the disturbing world of Westeros, and in spite of being afflicted with grayscale, she proved to quietly be one of the bravest characters the show had seen to that point. So, surely she was due a bit of happiness after such a sad life, right? Well, not on this series. However, it wasn't just the fact that she died that riled viewers up, but rather the extreme way in which she was executed in the story. The shocking moment not only made us weep for the young girl, but it was also the moment in which the world turned on her father Stannis, making his death in the subsequent episode all the more enjoyable. In a sense, then, Shireen's demise actually killed two heroes. Number 4, Emma Pillsbury, Glee. Glee's first season introduced us to a wide range of colourful characters. One of the more interesting from the eclectic bunch, though, was Emma Pillsbury, the eccentric guidance counsellor at McKinley High School. While Emma's main storyline saw her fall in love with Glee Club coach Will, she became so much more than this. Her constant battle with OCD made viewers sympathise with her, and her fear of commitment only strengthened her character, as it gave her plenty of obstacles to overcome throughout her arc. However, the writing got pretty lazy pretty quickly, with the character repeating several of her earlier storylines in the second season. In fact, the writing was so bad at one point that two contrasting stories of where Emma's OCD originated from were actually delivered to audiences. Emma subsequently became a shell of her former self, and before long, the actress left the show as well, only to return in a recurring capacity, meaning that other avenues in regards to the character were unable to be explored. In the end, Emma did get her happy ending, but it was a very diluted version of it, and viewers were ultimately robbed of some great storylines for the character. Number 3, Lane Kim, Gilmore Girls. Lane is one of the most likable characters on Gilmore Girls, yet one of the show's most cruelly treated. A childhood best friend of Rory, Lane's rebellious streak against her traditional mother showed us a girl with big dreams. She had aspirations to break out of town, pursue her passion for music, start a band, and ultimately find love via actual real-life dates. Unlike most of the other characters in the show, though, Lane was eventually sidelined with her dreams squashed in the process. Ultimately, her story showed her having to put all of her ambitions behind her as she settles down as a young mum when Rory moves away. That's because after having sex for the first time, which she describes as an awful experience, she gets pregnant and essentially becomes a mother to 3 children. Her 2 actual ones, and also the man-child that's her husband. Now, I just want to say, of course, there's nothing wrong with prioritizing family, enjoying domesticity, not enjoying sex, or being a conventional housewife. It's just the way that all of this is framed in the show which is the issue. And that's because Lane never indicated that she wanted any of this, or even likes any of it, and it almost feels like a punishment for her character ever daring to dream of a different life. In a show where most people get what they want and are happily ever after to boot, Lane is the only character who has to compromise. Number 2, Derek Shepard, Grey's Anatomy. There have been few relationships on television capable of rivaling that of Grey's Anatomy's Meredith Grey and Derek Shepard. The 2 doctors had been through the ringer on the hit ABC series, and suffered loss after loss as well as betrayal after betrayal, but that never stopped them from returning to each other's arms time after time. The strength of this relationship is why Derek's death during the middle of the 11th season is a rather hard pill to swallow for fans. For years, the Grey's Anatomy writers had built up this relationship, and Derek was largely part of Meredith's happily ever after. Killing him off in such a brutal fashion was a strong blow to fans of the series then, who simply couldn't understand why this happened to their beloved neurosurgeon. Not only was Derek's untimely death a kick in the head, but creator Shonda Rhimes didn't give the Grey's icon the end of season treatment one would have expected for a character of this status either, but rather wrote him out of the show during a random episode. If that wasn't bad enough, the show subsequently jumped a year into the future, robbing fans of the opportunity to grieve for Derek alongside Meredith. Number 1, Jesus, The Walking Dead. Jesus is only one in a huge line of characters failed by The Walking Dead. Tyrese, Carl, Andrea, the list goes on. In fact, it's probably more noteworthy to name the ones the show actually got right at this point, but still, Jesus is one of the cock-ups. And that's because the Jesus character played a significant role in the comics, being a badass martial artist, strong-willed leader, and overall pretty cool fella. He had an actual role to play in the storyline as well, which can't really be said for Tom Paine's tragic TV iteration of this character. And his mistreatment on the show sucks because he started out so well. His intro Superhero opened the show up to a whole new world. But since then, the writers gave him absolutely no storylines, watered down his personality, and killed him off to introduce a new threat. Tom Payne himself was understandably pissed off by this, and hasn't had fun things to say about the direction his character went on the show either.